Come on a second.
Sorry, can I
Gemma, do you want to come out?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just want to see them.
Hand just over to your hands. Alright, Gemma, at this moment, I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. Okay, you don't have to say anything, but you may have a defence, do not mention one question, something which you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence, okay? Once you're in your cuffs.
In June 2021, a quiet suburban neighbourhood in Wembley, North London, became the backdrop for one of the most shocking and disturbing true crime cases the UK had seen in years. What began as a story of trust and friendship would soon unravel into a chilling tale of betrayal, greed, and unimaginable violence. This is the story of Jemma Mitchell and her victim, 67-year-old Mee Kuen Chong, known to friends as Debbie. Welcome to the Crime Documentary. A woman of faith, a woman of kindness, and a woman who could never have imagined that her generosity would lead to her brutal end. Debbie, or Mee Kuen Chong, was originally from Malaysia but had lived in London for decades. She was well known in her community for her warmth, her faith, and her generosity. A devout Christian, she often attended church services and spent her free time writing letters to friends and keeping diaries. Those who knew her described her as deeply kind-hearted but also sometimes vulnerable, someone who longed for companionship and guidance. In 2016, Debbie met Jemma Mitchell through church circles. Jemma was 38 years old, highly educated, and presented herself as a healer. She claimed knowledge of both medicine and spirituality, portraying herself as someone who could help others find peace and balance. On the surface, Jemma appeared intelligent and refined, the daughter of a successful family with a background in medical sciences. But beneath that carefully crafted image was a woman living a very different reality. By 2021, Jemma was unemployed, financially unstable, and increasingly desperate. She had recently inherited her mother's large North London home, but was struggling with money, renovations, and pressure from those around her. And in Debbie, she saw not just a friend, but an opportunity. Over time, Jemma and Debbie developed what seemed like a close friendship. Debbie was often generous with money and gifts, especially to those she trusted. And Jemma, charismatic and persuasive, gained her confidence. Debbie looked to Jemma for advice, guidance, and healing. But as the months passed, Jemma's frustrations began to grow. She saw Debbie not just as a companion, but as someone she could manipulate to her advantage. What Debbie didn't know was that Jemma's outward calm and charm masked a deep inner turmoil and a deadly plan. Friends later recalled that Debbie occasionally spoke about Jemma in ways that raised concern. Sometimes Debbie would mention disagreements, confusion, or feeling pressured. But as with many victims of manipulation, she continued to trust. Trust that Jemma was a friend. Trust that she was someone she could rely on. Trust that would ultimately prove fatal. By the spring of 2021, Jemma's financial situation was worsening. She had no stable income, yet maintained an expensive lifestyle. At the same time, Debbie's mental health was fragile. She had been under the care of local doctors and was sometimes vulnerable in her decisions. For Jemma, this combination was an opportunity. She believed she could secure Debbie's money and possessions. But when Debbie resisted, Jemma made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. On June 11, 2021, Jemma Mitchell walked calmly into Debbie's home in Wembley. To the outside world, it looked like a normal visit between two friends. But inside, something far more sinister was about to unfold. Debbie had no idea that this was the last day she would ever open her door. Jemma Mitchell was not just a friend. She presented herself as a healer, a woman with special knowledge, someone who could fix people emotionally and spiritually. But behind that facade, she lived a life of contradictions. She boasted about her education in osteopathy and her family's status, yet she had no stable career. She appeared calm and intelligent, but carried resentment, desperation, and anger beneath the surface. Friends later described Jemma as manipulative, self-absorbed, and skilled at twisting situations to her advantage. To her, people weren't friends, they were resources. By 2021, Jemma was drowning in financial trouble. Her family home, inherited after her mother's death, was crumbling and in need of expensive repairs. She believed Debbie, kind-hearted and generous, would be the perfect solution. Jemma asked for large sums of money, tens of thousands of pounds, to help her with the house renovations. But Debbie, though generous, began to push back. She didn't want to give Jemma what she demanded. And in that refusal, Gemma's anger grew. Friends later said Debbie had started to distance herself. She wrote letters about feeling unsafe, about wanting space. For Jemma, this was unacceptable. In her mind, Debbie had betrayed her trust, and she decided to take matters into her own hands, permanently. On June 11th, 2021, Jemma set her plan into motion. She walked into Debbie's Wembley home with a smile, but behind it was pure malice. The so-called healer was about to reveal her darkest side. CCTV captured Jemma calmly walking toward Debbie's home around midday. She carried a large blue suitcase. What seemed like an ordinary visit between friends would soon become a crime scene. What happened inside Debbie's home can only be pieced together by forensic evidence. Police later concluded that Jemma attacked Debbie with violent force. Debbie suffered a skull fracture so severe that it killed her almost instantly. Jemma had planned carefully. She brought her suitcase, not for a friendly overnight stay, but to hide a body. Neighbors saw nothing unusual that day. CCTV cameras showed Jemma leaving hours later dragging the same suitcase, now impossibly heavier. Inside it, Debbie's lifeless body. Jemma walked away as if nothing had happened, calm, composed. No one yet knew that Debbie was dead, hidden inside a suitcase, in the hands of the very woman she trusted most. Over the next 2 weeks, Jemma began one of the most shocking cover-ups in British crime history. With Debbie's body inside the suitcase, she stored it at her home in Willesden. She continued her daily routine, even visiting neighbors. No one knew she was living alongside the corpse of her supposed friend. On June 26th, CCTV captured Jemma loading the same suitcase into a taxi. She told the driver she was traveling to visit friends, but her real destination was Salcombe, Devon, over 200 miles away. There, she dumped Debbie's body in woodland. On June 27th, locals in Salcombe discovered human remains in the woods. The body was badly decomposed, but soon identified as 67-year-old Debbie Chong. The case now shifted from a missing person to murder. When Debbie's body was discovered, police quickly looked at her last known movements. CCTV showed Jemma as one of the final people to see her alive. Detectives began piecing the puzzle together. Jemma's suitcase trips, taxi rides, inconsistencies in her story. And soon, suspicion pointed directly at her. CCTV was critical. Cameras captured Jemma's every movement. Arriving at Debbie's house, leaving with the suitcase, taking taxis, and even dragging it through streets. Her calmness was chilling, as if she believed no one would notice. In July 2021, police raided Jemma's home. Inside, they found forensic evidence, including bloodstains and Debbie's belongings. Jemma was arrested and charged with murder. In 2022, Jemma Mitchell stood trial at the Old Bailey. The prosecution painted her as cold, calculated, and greedy. They said she killed Debbie to get access to her money and attempted to cover it up with shocking calmness. The suitcase, the CCTV, the forensic blood evidence, one by one the pieces painted a devastating picture. The jury saw Jemma's lies unravel, and the truth became undeniable. After weeks of evidence, the jury reached a decision: guilty of murder. In October 2022, Jemma Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years. The healer had become a killer. For Debbie's friends and family, the trial brought some closure, but also lasting pain. They remembered her as kind, caring, and generous. A woman who should have lived out her years in peace, not fallen victim to greed. The case shocked the community. How could someone like Jemma, educated, trusted, spiritual, commit such a brutal act? The betrayal of friendship cut deep. It was not just murder, it was exploitation of kindness. The murder of Debbie Chong by Jemma Mitchell raises haunting questions. How can trust turn so deadly? How does manipulation blind victims? And how can greed push someone beyond humanity itself? Debbie's story is one of kindness betrayed, a friendship twisted into something evil. Like and subscribe for more real crime stories, turn on notifications, because the next case might be even darker.